Hi, welcome back to our business ethics class. So today we'll talk about shareholder theory, stakeholder theory, and also ethical decision-making models. So firstly, let's talk about shareholder theory, which was proposed by Friedman. So that was the first required reading we did. So the core premise of shareholder theory was that the primary responsibility of business is to maximize shareholder value with the bounds of the law. So Friedman says that the social responsibility of business is to increase its profits. So the rationale here is that business managers are agents of the shareholders, not social activists. So they should really care about the profits and the shareholder value. So spending corporate funds on social causes is equivalent to imposing a tax on shareholders, customers, or employees. Social issues should be addressed by governments and individuals, not businesses. So that was the rough kind of argument and idea of the shareholder theory. Friedman in that paper critiques corporate social responsibility. So he argues that corporate social responsibility basically distracts from the profit maximization mission. It reduces efficiency and competitiveness, and managers lack the democratic mandate to decide on social priorities. So he feels like the idea of corporate social responsibility really is imposing something that's necessary and unreasonable on businesses. So there are some arguments supporting Friedman. So basically, the two arguments are the first is efficiency in free markets. So he argues that profitable businesses create jobs, pay taxes, and drive innovation. So for instance, Apple focuses on shareholder value but contributes indirectly to society by revolutionizing technology. So if you focus on your shareholders, you will still be able to benefit the society, but in ways that's much more efficient. And also, the second argument is clear accountability, so which argues that shareholder primacy prevents managers from pursuing personal or unclear social agendas. So they argue that sometimes maybe this social cause that's promoted maybe just the personal concern of a manager, or maybe it just benefits like a specific group to which the manager belongs to, so for the selfish or like self-interest for the manager. So if we adopt the shareholder approach, then it prevents this kind of thing. So it makes it clear, and it ensures that we don't get into like we don't get a lot of personal and self-interest needs and wants and beliefs of the managers into the kind of the business or the structure of the business. However, there are also a lot of arguments against Friedman and the shareholder theory. So the stakeholder theory was proposed. So it talks about broader stakeholder responsibilities. So critiques argue that businesses impact a wide range of stakeholders, like employees, customers, communities, and the environment. And also a lot of people have ethical concerns. So they feel like profit maximization can lead to unethical practices like exploitation, labor, environmental harm. So you can think about Marxist philosophers. They might talk about exploitation, and they might talk about how workers get alienated. Kantian philosophers might talk about like if you just focus on maximizing profit, then a lot of the times you might just ignore or dismiss the kind of innate autonomous and dignity nature of human. So you might think of a lot of ethical frameworks or moral philosophy that we've covered will disagree with this. Thus, we move on to the stakeholder theory. So we read the required reading. And this reading talk about the stakeholder theory, the history of it, the basic concepts of it. So the paper basically was very important back at the time. It was a very important moment in shifting the way businesses view their responsibilities. So we have three kind of concepts that's important here. So the first is normative stakeholder theory. So this focuses on the ethical or moral obligations businesses have toward their stakeholders. It suggests that businesses should treat all stakeholders fairly and justly. The second is a descriptive stakeholder theory. So this aims to describe and explain how businesses actually interact with their stakeholders. So it focuses on understanding the relationships and behaviors between firms and stakeholders. And the third is instrumental stakeholder theory. So this focuses on the outcomes of stakeholder management, specifically the impact on organizational performance. This dimension suggests that properly managing stakeholders can enhance a company's profitability and long-term success. And of course, the stakeholder theory does encounter a lot of challenges and debates as well. So firstly, it's very hard to define stakeholders, and it's never the case that we clearly have a list of people that are the stakeholders. And also the stakeholder paradox. So it argues that it's difficult or even impossible for companies to balance all stakeholder interests simultaneously. So companies may have thousands of or at least hundreds of stakeholders. So they might have a lot of different interests. How can you just balance all of their interests together? Some argue that the stakeholder theory is just too idealistic and not practical in real world business operations, and people's interests conflict. And also people argue that focuses on stakeholder framework will impact business performance. So the theory suggests that stakeholder management can benefit a company's performance. And evidence supporting this link remains mixed. So that kind of suggestion in different papers or by the theory are not actually so strongly established. And as you can see, there is a lot of tension in between the two theories, the stakeholder and the shareholder theory. So there is actually a lot of room to do more research to defend or establish either of the theory. And so let's move on to the different ethical decision-making models. So the first I want to talk about is Bartel's ethical decision-making model. So it argues that ethical decision-making in marketing is not just an individual's internal process, but is deeply influenced by the societal context, which includes cultural norms, laws, religious beliefs, and the broader expectations of economic roles like those between employees and customers. So a lot of social and cultural background and context there. And for this model, a very, very key concept or a key theoretical resource there was called the ethical sensitivity. So Bartel talked about this a lot and led this concept as a lot of work for his model. So this explains why different marketers react differently to ethical dilemmas. And he had 4 levels of and he talks about 4 levels of ethical sensitivity. So basically with these 4 concepts or aspects of ethical sensitivity, you basically can explain the complex behavior of different marketers when they react to ethical dilemmas. So there are also a lot of ethical decision-making models based on moral philosophy. So for instance, Kohlberg's theory of cognitive moral development focuses on moral development where individuals progress through stages based on their cognitive moral development. And also Rath's four-component model. So it adds a practical framework to Kohlberg. So his four-component model includes recognizing the moral issue, making a moral judgment, establishing a moral intent, and engaging in moral behavior. And then forces the taxonomy of ethical ideologies. So it introduces two ethical perspectives, idealism and relativism. So this is a very kind of central distinction for the theory. Idealists tend to view actions as either ethical or unethical based on rigid principles, while relativists evaluate actions depending on the situation and consequences. So this offers a lot of insights into how different moral philosophers affect decision-making behavior in the workspace. So this is actually a very good theory to kind of shed light on what we talk about, like in the previous 3 units when we talk about like the different ethical theories. Next model is Farrell and Graham's contingency model. So this model emphasizes the importance of significant others, such as coworkers, supervisors, and executives, so in shaping an individual's ethical decisions. So the organization's culture and policies play a crucial role in influencing behavior. So unlike earlier models that focus mainly on individual factors, the contingency model highlights how social learning and the work environment impact ethical decisions. So the presence of ethical role models within an organization can have a profound influence on how employees make ethical choices. Let's move on to the person-situation interactionist model. So this model combines individual and situational factors to explain how ethical decisions are made in organizations. So this model incorporates Kohlberg's stages of moral development, but also emphasizes the role of organizational culture and situational factors. So some examples of individual factors would be ego strength and locus of control, and some situational factors would be like immediate work contacts and organizational culture. So it has a very good mix of like what's going on with the individuals and also features of the environment. The next model combines deontological evaluation with teleological evaluation. So the deontological evaluation would focus on questions like, does the action respect the rights and duties of others? So as you can see, there is a Kantian root in there, right? So at Kant, we were talking about rights and duties. And also, it talks about a teleological evaluation. So it talks about what are the consequences of the action, do the benefits outweigh the harm, and it tries to establish the greatest good for the greater number of stakeholders. So as you can see, there is very strong utilitarian vibes there. And the third aspect or component of this model is opportunity and behavioral outcomes. So it talks about the external factors that either enable or restrict a person's ability to make an ethical decision. So if an individual doesn't have the chance to engage in an ethical action due to company policies, organizational culture, or regulatory oversight, they are less likely to act unethically. So as you can see, this model covers Kantian roots, it covers utilitarian roots, it also talks about the kind of moralistic external factors and outcomes. So it seems to be a pretty kind of all-rounded model that seems to cover a lot of aspects of ethical decision making. So there is also this concept of actual consequence. So opportunity and behavioral outcomes kind of talks about like expectation or anticipation of different consequences, but there is also the actual consequence led to by an ethical decision, by a decision that's made, or by an action that's done, right? So it covers a lot of different aspects. However, this model also suffers from critique as well. So firstly, it's been argued that it just emphasizes too much on the moral philosophies. Sometimes people doubt that, especially for those who do not agree that much with those moral philosophies, and tend to focus more on the more kind of business work, or more kind of like quantitative, scientific research of business ethics. And the next model I'm going to talk about is the synthesis model. So this model integrates elements from several previous frameworks. So the contingency model, the person situation interactionist model, and the Hunt Vital model we were just talking about. So it combines cognitive moral development with teleological and deontological perspectives. It also talks about the importance of social learning theory. So the social learning theory talks about the idea that individuals learn ethical behavior from significant others, such as co-workers and supervisors. So a lot of different elements here. So it's much more complex. So as with the Hunt Vital model, the synthesis model acknowledges that opportunity and organizational culture play a key role in determining ethical decisions. So an individual's values, their cognitive moral development, and the connection with and the context within their organization will shape their final ethical decision. So one kind of strength of synthesis model is that it combines a lot of different elements and a lot of different very important aspects of the mechanism of ethical decision making and ethical behaviors. So it has the potential to address a lot of different complex behaviors. So a lot of people think this is a more like rich theoretical tool, or like a richer theoretical resource. And we also have the issue contingent model by Jones. So Jones argues that like the previous models are all wrong and they put their emphasis on the wrong point. And the nature of the ethical issue itself is the primary driver of ethical decision making, rather than just the individual's moral development or organizational context. So they feel like the nature of the ethical question or issue or case itself is the most important, while the individuals and the environment is really less relevant. And one very central concept of this is the moral intensity concept, which talks about the degree to which an issue is perceived as ethically significant. So some factors influence moral intensity, like magnitude of consequences, like social consensus, like probability of effect, like temporal immediacy and proximity. So, and also concentration of effect. So, the issue contingent model argues that decisions involving higher moral intensity will be more readily recognized as ethical issues, and then individuals will engage in more sophisticated moral reasoning when making such decisions. So they will make more kind of complex thinking, and that would result in they putting more efforts and faith and kind of attempts to think into making these decisions. So the contribution of this model is that it offers useful tools for practitioners to assess the ethical intensity of a situation and understand why some ethical issues might be more difficult to recognize or address than others. So now we have kind of tools to explain things like these. However, this model also suffers from critiques as well. So for instance, this paper argues that the model doesn't fully account for the influence of organizational context on moral intensity. So while it maybe says something true about the nature and the moral intensity of the issue, shapes a lot of how we react to it and how much effort we put into it. It's not the full story. Maybe there is more out there. So maybe we have to still incorporate those into our models rather than just to throw them all out and just leave this concept of a moral intensity within here. And we also have a lot more models being developed during the past 30 years, but also probably right now as well. So a lot of new models has come out. So this paper was written pretty early. So at the time it was written, a lot of models we see today has not emerged. For instance, those two models that's put here. Of course, I think there is a lot more you can find online and in a lot of different places. So if you want to write about one of these models or to compare and contrast some of these more contemporary or even like most cutting edge models with those older models, so I think that would be something has the potential of a really, really good paper as well. So I guess to conclude this whole lecture, we've covered a lot of different ethical decision making models. It was pretty quick, so it was just like roughly sketching the landscape for you. I think if you try to search online, there is more critiques or analysis or more in-depth explorations of these models, and of course people have, for each of these models, people would have done a series of very in-depth research. I didn't cover any of that. I just wanted to make like a rough landscape for you so that you have the kind of reference and you have the kind of rough idea of what things are out there so that you can go for the ones that seem to resonate with you. And also I wanted to kind of show you what it's like to have ethical decision-making models and how they have evolved so that you know what ethical decision-making models roughly look like and what might be the components to be of concern there. So that's all for this lecture. Thank you so much. See you in the next lecture.